Good morning, lovelies. The old and the new, let's talk about it. Jesus, coffee. So, I put a post up yesterday morning as I'm going through the parables and really uncovering and tearing apart the parables, and asked people if there was any parables they wanted me to read and tear apart and discuss. And Elijah, outstanding young man in Iowa, had asked me, hey, can you do Matthew 9? He asked for verses 16 and 17, which have to do with the old and the new, but I'm actually going to tear apart 14 through 17. I'm going to address 16 and 17 first, but I want to do 14 and 15 as well. I want to read through the whole passage first. So, again, this is Matthew 9, so this is after the Sermon on the Mount, but Jesus went through a lot in Matthew 9. He forgave and healed the paralytic who was lowered into the house. He had called Matthew. Just so much going on. But he's questioned about fasting, and this question regarding fasting actually comes not from the Pharisees. This actually comes from John the Baptist's disciples. They're asking him about his disciples and why his disciples don't fast. So listen to the passage. So then the disciples of John came to him, saying, why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast? So, talking about why do they and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples don't? Jesus says, can the friends of the bridegroom mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away. Good morning. And then they will fast. No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch pulls away from the garment, and the tear is made worse. Nor do they put new wine in old wineskins. The wine is spilled, and the wineskins are ruined. But they put new wine in new wineskins, and both are preserved. So, Elijah, to answer your question, and really break down I'll get to verses 14 and 15 when Jesus talks about how you doing, buddy? Talks about fasting. I'll get to that in a minute, but to answer your question and really break down verses 16 and 17, so what they're talking about there and what Jesus is talking about with putting a new patch on an old cloth, a tear in an old cloth, and putting new wine in old wineskins is, so the old that he's talking about and referencing is the garment and the old wineskins. Well, old wineskins aren't pliable, right? And neither are old clothes, right? They're already fixed and shrunk, and so they're not very pliable. Well, that's referencing the law of Judaism. So it's referencing the law. The law isn't very giving. Hey, here's the law, we stick to it. It's not, there's no pliability in it. The reference of the new patch and the new wine going in, and the new wine are talking about the grace and the free gift of Jesus' salvation. The salvation that Jesus offers. It's not works-based. It's a gift. You can't mix the two because the two don't go. Actually, I want to go through what was said in the commentary. What he writes in the commentary is so beautiful. A Judaistic Christianity, which, with a profession of grace and the gospel, attempts to keep the law and foster legal righteousness, is a greater abomination in the eyes of God than professing Israel in the past, worshiping idols. So trying to mix the transforming grace of Jesus with the law is an abomination to God, really, because it's not about keeping the law. And when you're so focused on the law that you forget about the lawgiver, that's called legalism. That's where you're so hyper-focused on the law that you forget about the one who gave the law, the one who wrote the law with his finger on those tablets, and the one who wrote in the sand when the adulterous woman was brought to him so she could be stoned. Jesus wrote in the sand and told them, "Those among you who have no sin, cast the first stone." And all the while, he's writing in the sand. And when he's writing in the sand, he's actually showing them the finger of God in Exodus that wrote, Exodus 31:18, the finger of God who wrote those commands on the tablets. That's why they all started dropping the stones. Whoops. So it's about not mixing grace and law. It's all about the grace. It's all about Jesus' grace and that gift that we're given. That's why Ephesians 2:8-9, right? For by grace you've been saved by faith, not of works, not of yourself. It is a gift of God, so no man may boast. Can't say, hey, I worked my way to heaven. Oh, no. Negative. Can't work your way there. That's a gift. Believe in the one who stretched himself out on the cross and took all of your sin, all of your penalty of all of the sin you've committed in your life and will ever commit, and nailed it with him to the cross. He took for being forsaken by the Father. That's why he told him on the cross, as he had to push himself up and endure wicked amounts of pain, cried out to the Father, "Good morning, Darlene," and cried out to the Father and said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." And then again, some among his final words were, "Father, Father, why have you forsaken me?" Because at that point in time, Jesus and the Father were disconnected from each other. And Jesus knew that. And that's why he cried out, because he knew he had to be forsaken. Because his Father couldn't look upon all of the sin that was on him. It was such an unholy sight for the Father that he actually looked away as his Son drew his final breath. And that's why Jesus said, "It is finished." I was the propitiation and took Dad's wrath for you. And all of the prophecies are now fulfilled. So verses 14 and 15, where Jesus is asked about why don't his disciples fast. So his disciples don't fast, and what he's talking about is can the friends of a bridegroom mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? Well, who's the bridegroom? Jesus. Who's the guests of the feast? We are. So they weren't fasting because Jesus was still with them. Jesus, when he was taken away, what season are we in now? We're in the season of Lent, right? Which is a season of fasting for 40 days. Giving something up for 40 days. Giving something that you hold dear, something you want to change, and giving it up for 40 days. Why? In reverence to Jesus, because we're coming up on Easter, which is Lent is 40 days before Easter. 46 days before Easter, actually. But 6 of those are Sundays, considered the Sabbath. So 40 days of actually giving up something. So that's what he's talking about in there, is when Jesus was taken up and was taken away, then they would mourn and fast. Because what is Easter? It's a celebration of him being risen. So there you go. So there's the breakdown of Matthew 9, verses 14 through 17. Hopefully that answers your question, Elijah. So it's grace and law. They don't mix. You can't mix. Grace being the new, because it comes from Christ and his ministry, his time on earth, and his covenant, as compared to the covenant of old with, do we still follow the 10 Commandments? Yes, all except for Sabbath. We don't observe the Sabbath because we're not Orthodox, so we don't observe the Sabbath. Jesus never really commanded that. Again, 2 biggest commands from Jesus were love the Lord with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And second, just like it is to love others as yourself. On these hang the balance of the 10. You're welcome, buddy. If you guys ever have questions, leave me a comment, send me a message in the inbox, anything, whatever, and say, hey, Jim, would you mind breaking this down? I would love to. Because God gets to bless you through teaching you. And don't you think he's teaching me too? Yeah. So it's a blessing because it allows me to dig deeper into the Word and for God to teach me, and then for him to teach you through what he's taught me. So it's a blessing for both of us. So don't be afraid to reach out. No, there's no bad questions, guys. I love you. I know he loves you like crazy. You guys have an amazing weekend. We'll be back Monday with whatever Dad wants to talk about.